Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be looking at the case of Amanda Zhao Wei, and she is often referred to as just simply Amanda Zhao, and her family's subsequent fight for justice in an unprecedented case that linked China and Canada. Amanda was born in the People's Republic of China in 1981. She was the only child of Yang Baoying and Chao Zixun. Amanda's family did not have much money, but her parents worked hard to provide their daughter with the best possible life and options for her future. They spent their life savings in order to send their daughter to Canada to study as part of a student exchange program. On the 31st of July 2001, Amanda flew from Beijing to Vancouver, where she was to study English at Coquitlam College in Vancouver. During her time there, 21-year-old Amanda met and began dating an 18-year-old man by the name of Ang Lee. Lee was also from China and was in Vancouver studying computer science at Simon Fraser University. Lee came from a wealthy family. His father worked for the Chinese government as a high-ranking military official in Beijing, and his mother worked in the entertainment industry. Although details of Amanda and Lee's relationship are scarce, the couple began living together after dating for a few months. Together with Lee's cousin, Chang Han, the three students shared a tiny basement apartment on Sherlock Avenue in Burnaby. At around 8 p.m. on Wednesday the 9th of October 2002, Amanda left the apartment to go to the Safeway store at Kensington Avenue and Hastings Street, which was just over a mile away from her home. However, she did not return. Lee tried to call her multiple times, but to no avail. After several hours, he became extremely concerned and decided to notify the police. He called the 911 emergency line at around midnight, but was told to call back on a non-emergency number. So, following those instructions, when he did so, a civilian employee advised him to wait for 24 hours and then call back if necessary. When Lee called again the following evening, a constable was immediately assigned to the case, but it would be another 6 days before details of Amanda's disappearance were made public. In a newspaper report on the 17th of October, Amanda was described as a model student who had never gone missing before. She didn't use drugs, she rarely drank, she didn't gamble, and she didn't even go out at night, and had no association with gangs. Concerns for Amanda's safety began to rise, with the police admitting that they had dropped the ball by not getting her picture and details made public earlier. The police faced extensive criticism for how the investigation was handled, particularly because Amanda had disappeared just hours after the attempted abduction of a 38-year-old Korean woman in the same area. Lee made a tearful plea to the public, and he stated that he blamed himself as he had not driven her to the supermarket that night. 3 days later, on October the 20th, 2002, a couple of hikers walking by Stave Lake, which is located about 40 miles east of Vancouver, came across a suitcase. They went to investigate, and as they approached the suitcase, they detected an unpleasant smell before discovering a woman's body inside. They notified the authorities, and it was soon confirmed that the body found in the suitcase belonged to 21-year-old Amanda. Her autopsy later revealed that she had died of strangulation. Within 3 days of Amanda's body being found, her boyfriend Lee suddenly decided to return to China. He said that he needed to extend his visa and would be returning to Canada once this had been arranged. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police detained him at the airport and briefly questioned him before allowing him to continue with his journey. It was reported in the press that he was not a suspect. A public memorial attended by over 200 people took place on the 3rd of November at the Vancouver Art Gallery, and 2 trust funds were set up in Amanda's memory to assist her parents financially. The toll of Amanda's murder had made both her mother and father ill, and they had both been admitted to hospital in Beijing for tests and monitoring. 2 days after being discharged from hospital, Yang Baoying, Amanda's mother, arrived in Vancouver. Amanda's father, Zhao Zhishun, had a chronic heart condition which meant that he was unable to travel. 9 days later, on November the 20th, Yang Baoying returned home to Beijing with her daughter's ashes and no answers as to what had happened to her child. A breakthrough in the case came after police interviewed Li's cousin, 19-year-old Chang Han. Han said that it was Li who had killed Amanda and also admitted that he had helped Li dispose of Amanda's body. Han was charged with being an accessory after the fact and released on 90,000 Canadian dollars bail. In a further blow to the family's fight for justice, it was determined that the evidence against Han had been improperly gathered and the charges against him were then subsequently thrown out. On May 12, 2003, 7 months after the murder and Li's return to China, the Canadian police issued a warrant for his arrest. Li was charged with second-degree murder in absentia by the Canadian government. However, it would take more years for the police and governments to agree on his prosecution. This was an unprecedented case, and drawn-out negotiations between the two governments would add to the devastation that Amanda's parents felt at the loss of their only child. In 1994, 8 years before Amanda's murder, Canada and China signed the Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters. This treaty actually meant that the two countries would grant each other mutual legal assistance in criminal matters and could share documents, obtain statements and provide evidence, as well as transferring material evidence and providing criminal and court records to assist in criminal proceedings. Even though China and Canada had agreed to share such information and cooperate according to this treaty, there is an exception. In the event of the possibility that someone could be executed for their crimes, Canada could refuse to provide legal assistance since the death penalty is prohibited by Canada's domestic laws. If Li was convicted of Amanda's murder in China, he would face the death penalty, and as such Canada was unwilling to share information and evidence related to this case. Rather than provide the Chinese police with evidence, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police requested Li's extradition back to Canada. This request was rejected. In 2007, Amanda's family sent a letter to the Department of Justice in Canada in which they stated, "We lost our only daughter. 5 years are gone and justice still isn't served. Is this fair? The two old people are still in extreme pain, so painful that we don't want to live on. Every day is a torture. If the same thing happened to you, would you be able to take it? I beg you, tell us your timeline or agenda on this case so that at least we know something. Don't let us wait forever." A year later, in 2008, Amanda's parents and her cousin Li Junjun travelled to Vancouver to continue their fight for justice and to get an update on the case. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police apologised to her parents about mistakes that had been made during their investigation, and on October the 9th, 2008, which was the 6th anniversary of Amanda's death, a memorial service was held commemorating her life. Jenny Kwan, a member of the Legislative Assembly, apologised to Amanda's parents and said, "The court system here and the police system failed the Zhao family. There is no mistake about that." Ang Li was allowed to leave the country and fled back to China. His cousin, Chang Han, was charged, but there were complications with not following the proper procedures, and as a result, that case was thrown out of court. Those were hard lessons for the RCMP, and more dramatically, hard lessons for the family. The Chinese authorities were committed to bringing the suspected killer to justice, but needed the cooperation from Canada. In March 2008, a political consensus was reached and the Canadian files were shared with the Chinese police with the assurance that Li would not be executed if he was found guilty. However, due to Li's family connections, he was represented by a top lawyer and the case was delayed yet again. In 2011, 9 years after Amanda's body was found, Li would finally go to trial in a Chinese court, but once again the process was far from quick or easy. This would be the first time that a crime committed on Canadian soil would be prosecuted in China. 2 days of testimony began on the 20th of September 2011. According to Amanda Zhao's parents, Li and his family had shown no remorse, whereas Li's parents claimed that their son was heartbroken by Amanda's death and that the pair had been in a loving relationship. When the evidence was presented, Li's family allegedly stormed out of court, claiming that the evidence proved that their child was innocent, and then a long wait for a verdict followed. In 2012, according to the Globe and Mail, Li confessed to the killing shortly after he was arrested in Beijing in 2009. However, he claimed that he had accidentally suffocated Amanda during a pillow fight. He initially thought that Amanda had fainted, but then realised that she was dead. Li's mother defended her son, claiming that the confession was obtained under unimaginable torture by the Chinese authorities. However, Amanda's autopsy did not support this version of events, as she had died from strangulation and was found with bruises and marks on her neck. On the 27th of September 2012, over a year after the original evidence was presented at trial, it was finally reported that Li had been found guilty of intentional homicide and sentenced to life in prison. Almost 10 years after Amanda's murder, her parents finally saw the man responsible for their only child's death brought to justice. However, the family's relief was short-lived. On the 30th of June 2014, Li's conviction was downgraded from murder to manslaughter by the Supreme Court of Beijing. This thereby reduced the life sentence to just 7 years. The appeal judges appear to have taken into account the fact that the two were supposedly in a loving relationship and that it was a pillow fight that had gone wrong. This change to Li's conviction and sentence was extremely controversial, as the Supreme Court ruled without any new evidence being presented. Amanda's family said that they thought the original ruling was fair and just, but this change was unacceptable, stating that it changed their opinion about the fairness of the law and that the ruling abundantly represents that the law can be bought with power or money in China. With his reduced sentence, Li was released from prison in June 2016. Despite their best efforts, Amanda's family were never able to secure the justice that their daughter deserved. That concludes today's story. A regular viewer called Preska from BC suggested that I cover this story. Please help the channel by clicking like, commenting and subscribing. Thanks very much for listening to The Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. Canada and China are almost the same size in square kilometres. They do have a slightly different population, however. Canada has 38 million, whilst China only has 1.4 billion. Yep, billion. Goodbye.